Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Bakukul, Gildember. Yeah, the 4th. Hey, it's Friday. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my spoiler-filled review of a very old book, The Dragons of Krynn, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members and invite you to consider becoming a member, if you're not already, by visiting the link in the description below. You can always pick up DragonLance game materials using my affiliate links, also in the description below. And it's the 40th anniversary! Wah! Yeah! We made it! We didn't do anything. We just survived. So, because there's nothing else really going on, I figured why not collect a bunch of contributions from other Dragonlance fans about Dragonlance and share it with the wider world. Why not? So that's what I'm doing. So if you want to contribute something, pretty much anything, as long as it's Dragonlance related, imagery, like a picture you made, or maybe, I don't know, like a diorama you put together, maybe it's a video or a sound bite, or maybe, I don't know, whatever you want to share with the wider world, shoot it to me at info@dlsaga.com. You have less than a month, less than 30 days, because November 1st at 1 a.m. Mountain Time, all of the submissions will be made live. So if you were working on something, wrap this up. Wrap it all up and send it over to me. I don't want a bunch of last minute submissions on Halloween because I'm going to be doing stuff. So if you send it to me on Halloween, know that it won't be published when everyone else's is. It'll be published the next day or so. Not that it really matters. Because you still love Dragonlance, and your contribution will still be out there. All right, that being said, this review is just my perspective. If yours differs, that's okay. We welcome different perspectives here. We're not like American political discourse, which doesn't welcome different perspectives. You're welcome here. It's okay. We don't have any litmus test. There's no one to check your ID. You can come in, share your love, and get out whenever you want. That being said, if you're tuning in live, say hi. If you're watching this after the fact, say hi. I'll say hi back. It'll just be a bunch of hi in the comments. All right, let's dive into this, shall we? There's a bunch of stories, so we've got a lot to go over. We open, as with all of these anthologies that were released back in the day, with a poem, or a series of poems, from Michael Williams. The eyes are rolling in. Hey, Nuevo DM, how you doing? Derek, how you doing, man? All right, so the 7 Hymns of the Dragon by Michael Williams. This 7 poems in this series are Approaches, Dragon Horde, The Language of Dragons, Hymn of the Lair, Paladine, The Journey, The Dreams of Dragons, etc. They're more style over substance, abstractly creating an atmosphere over an image of anything specific. Only Paladine was a bit more substantive, but even that was a bit nebulous. And while I enjoy reading them, I would enjoy them more if they were about something substantive, something like actually tangible. And I think this is my biggest problem, not just with Michael Williams's poetry, but with poetry in general. It's that when it's so loose and abstract, it's easy to lose the message that the poem is intended to share. Now, that message is just supposed to be tone and feeling, but when it's so disjointed, then I often let my mind just starts to wander, and I'm missing out on what could potentially be great poetry. And I don't know if I should blame myself, which is probably the case, or if I should blame the poet, or if I just should blame the form, the medium. But in whatever case, I'm having a real hard time with these poems. So we'll move on from them. The Final Touch by Michael and Teri Williams is the next short story. Now, this is a return to form. So this is a wonderful story about the druidess Lindasha in the Taman Busic. Now, they write about Lindasha in every short story they collaborate on. Every single one. I don't know why. Maybe it's like one of their D&D characters or just a shared character they love to use as a framing reference. In either case, I'm here for it because I enjoy her as a character. But It's just interesting that's the only person they always go back to. So the gardener named Mort comes and brought her a flower that he cultivated, and she tells him a story about a dragon egg. So just before the War of the Lance, Lindasha noticed evil dragons flying overhead, and an egg fell from one of their grasps. It ended up being a bronze dragon's egg. She knew that she was supposed to ignore it, as the druidic way is, apparently, as nature will take its own course. I would say gravity should have taken its own course if an egg falls from a flying dragon, but it didn't. And she's not supposed to meddle with anything. But she couldn't help look into it and see it for what it was, a dragon's egg, which is supposed to be extinct. Then, one day it hatched, and rather than let it die alone in these rough mountains, she took it in and named it Oliver. It did not want any porridge, so get that out of your head immediately. So Lindasha and Oliver had a lot of time together, and eventually she knew she had to teach it how to be a dragon because it wasn't being a dragon. If you've ever had chickens or farm animals of any kind, especially if you've raised them from the moment of birth, you realize that animals will latch onto their mother figure, whomever they think is their mother, and they will try their best to emulate that behavior. Sometimes it ends up being really funny because they don't realize that they're goats, for example. They think they're humans and they want to come inside and do what all the other humans do. Like with our chickens, they often want to come back inside and just sort of hang out with us because that's where they were raised for the first 6 or something weeks of their lives, in my workout room with heat lamps right over it. And so they just think, well, that's where I want to go back to. I'm going to go hang out. Like that's where home is. But they're chickens. They can't. That's what this dragon did. It wanted to be like Lindasha instead of a dragon. And so she had to try to fake what she thinks a dragon would be like so that the baby dragon would emulate that. Oliver had a lot of time together with her, and eventually she knew I'm sorry, I already read that. But Oliver was a bit of a scamp, and he was always getting into trouble. One day, a solamnic knight was traveling through looking for evil to thwart and came across hunters who killed a deer. He demanded to know who owned the forest to see if they were poachers, and they said that it was the druidess that owned land. So the knight was sure... Oh, wow, I skipped through this. The knight was sure that this was a baby thieving witch because that's what he had been taught all druidesses were. And so he hunted her lair and entered it, challenging her. I guess this is the part where I should probably talk about my frustration with how people write solamnic knights. They always write them as if they're idiots. They're complete morons with zero subjectivity and zero life experience or perspective of their own. It's always like, I was taught this one rigid line. I must always follow this one rigid line. And that's never how the world works. You often have to wonder why it was written that way in the measure in the first place when that was never the case. So apparently all druids are baby-stealing monsters, and so he has to go kill them. But it opened with him looking for a fight. So that's a very un-solamnic knight thing to do in the first place. And when you hinge an entire culture around the idea of finding honor and glory and defeating evil, then everything looks evil and everything needs to be destroyed. That's always... And the problem is I love solamnic knights, but I hate the rigidity that they're being written with. And because we have knights as examples, Sturm Brightblade, who is not this rigid moron of a knight, who does have life experience and perspective, who actually becomes wonderful character. I don't know. It drives me nuts. All right, so the only problem was that she was gone, but Oliver was there getting into her food stores. He's a little scamp. And so Oliver breathed gas as a defense mechanism, which took out the knight, and turned out that it knocked him out too. Which is another thing. I actually really do like this story, but there's a lot of little weird things in it. Why aren't dragons immune to their own dragon breath? And I'm not talking about another dragon of the same kind's dragon breath. I'm talking about their own. So if I'm a dragon and I breathe sleeping gas, why is it knocking me out? Wouldn't that always be the case? If you ever find a dragon in a lair or with like wind going in their face and they use their breath weapon, they're just going to be flying, knock themselves out, fall down and die. How useless is that? Like, shouldn't they be immune to their own breath weapon? And arguably, every version of said breath weapon, whether it's in a magical form or not. Otherwise, how could they possibly generate it to breathe it out? They would just literally, it would be as if you took chlorine gas, for example, and shoved it in your throat. But you could also breathe it out. Well, yeah, you breathe out the chlorine gas that was in your throat, but it's still going to mess you up. Why are dragons like that? They're supposed to be mystical, powerful creatures. It's stupid. All right. I did really like this story. Where is it? So she took care of both of them until they were healthy, and then she sent the knight on his way, who is now grateful and informed about the mercy of druids. The dragon was told to find his kind, as she knew that they were coming. It left, but it would return every once in a while to visit and make sure that she had water. One of the dragon's tasks when he was staying with her was to go get water. It was nice to see a baby dragon being silly and learning, and also becoming aware of a war-torn world and needing to find its own. And it was just kind of funny to see this, sort of interplay between this baby dragon and Lindasha, the druid, until you threw in the knight, which you really didn't need at all in the short story. He didn't add anything to it. It was literally like the whole story was based around Lindasha and the dragon, and then out of nowhere, this knight comes along, gets knocked out, heals, and then leaves. That was it. So, all right. But in either case, it was fun. Yeah, DMT. Night of the Falling Stars by Nancy Varian Berberick is the next one. And I just want to say quickly about the author, Nancy Varian Berberick. Silently, one of the best authors in all of Dragonlance. She is amazing in everything she's written. I have never read anything that she's written and been like, oh, that's a stinker. It's always great. Okay, that being said, this was a wonderful story about a mercenary named Ryle who watched his father die because he was too afraid to help him. This haunted him, and he did everything he could to prove himself and others that he wasn't a coward, but deep down, he felt like one. One day, a dwarf named Taran came to town looking to hire him. A copper dragon named Claw had killed his entire party as they were trying to steal his hoard. The dragon used Taran as bait and then let him go. He wanted revenge more than anything on this dragon for having done that to him. Ryle agreed to go with him, and eventually they made it into the dragon's lair, but the dragon was out. It turned out the dragon's favorite possession was the skull of its dead mate that it had sort of bejeweled, as it would. The dragon came back when Taran was trying to destroy the skull. They hid as the dragon consumed its meal. Then it discovered them slinking away. It grabbed Taran and used him again as bait, looking to Ryle's head and looking into his head with ESP, seeing that he believed that he was a coward. And so Ryle ended up turning his bow on the skull, which allowed them to leave. And as they were on their way out, Ryle hit the skull, crushing it once and for all. And they heard the dragon's wail of sorrow the whole time they were leaving the cave. This is a story about loss and fear and pain. Each one of these characters were scarred and in emotional pain. It was painfully real, and I really liked it because it humanized every single character, whether it was the dragon or whether it was the bad guy going in to steal and then feeling shame and having PTSD from being used as basically as a trap mechanism. And then also for Ryle for having suffered through watching his father die and regretting not doing something about it. I love it when you can get to the emotional core of a character in a short story so intimately, so powerfully that you're actually moved by it. And really, only a handful of authors in Dragonlance have been able to do that. And Nancy Varian Berberick is one of them. She's great. The next one is Honor is All by Mickey Zerker Reichert. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. This was a touching tale about a knight of the crown who lived for his oath and measure. So much so that his devoted wife left him as he only had a place in his heart for his honor. He went off looking for ways to gain renown and came across a village who was supposedly terrorized by a dragon. He knew that by defeating an evil dragon, he would bring glory to his name and went in search for him. He came to the cave and called out to the dragon. It appeared white in the dim light, and the dragon refused to fight him, saying that it had harmed no one, and this didn't matter to the knight. If it was a white dragon, then it was evil and it should be killed. He snuck in the back way, fought, and ultimately killed the white dragon. In its dying breath, it asked the knight to look after its young, as it and she were not what they appeared to be. The knight was certain that this beast's offspring should also die, and was about to kill it. He stopped. He remembered that the breath weapon that the dragon used was gas, not cold. The size was much larger than a white dragon should be as well. He realized that he killed an albino silver dragon and almost killed its offspring. So he killed a good dragon. This sent him spiraling, questioning everything. His honor and desire for glory led him to an evil act. It caused his marriage to end and almost killed an infant dragon. He decided that he would take the baby dragon to his wife, who loved all animals, and beg her to take him back and protect this creature. I love a story that forces you to rethink the concepts of good and evil, honor and glory. And justice is what is right. Justice and what is right are colored heavily by perspective. And when you're forced to see things differently, you often come to new conclusions and grow as an individual. It's great. I don't ever shame. No, it's not true. I do shame people for seeing the world black and white, good and evil, right and wrong, because that's just not what it's like. Everywhere I've ever had the privilege of going, whether it's stateside or outside of the states over in Europe, or Central America, wherever I've ever gone, every single human has the same motivations and drives. They care about their families to some degree, excluding, maniacs. They want the best for them. They want a better world. It's sort of the overarching human organizational power structure that ends up ruining it for the rest of us. So whenever we reduce each other to ones and zeros, we're actually like destroying what it means to be human in the first place. And we're oversimplifying something that is really not very challenging and difficult. We can all get along with each other, regardless of how you feel about religion, social norms, cultures, political parties, or anything. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that we're human beings, we're all individuals, none of us are a monolith, and we're all trying to live the best version of our own lives that we can. All right, the next story is Easy Pickings by Douglas Niles. Again, Douglas Niles is one of those few people who always writes a good story, and he is the most prolific Dragonlance author for the game products over anyone else. If you think Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman had something to do with Dragonlance, you need to set them aside and realize that Douglas Niles wrote more than either of them combined. He's great. So you will always enjoy reading one of Niles' stories. This was about an ogre in the Third Dragon War who ambushed a group of knights, then were driven off by a squad of dragon-mounted knights. The ogre fled into the mountains looking for easy pickings and came across a gold dragon. Terrified, it took him a while to realize that the dragon was dead. He approached it bravely, kicked on it, and spat on it, and it didn't move, proving that it was in fact dead. Then he saw a hatchling approach. This was a little rough. He crushed the hatchling with his club and immediately realized that if there's a hatchling nearby, there's a dragon's lair nearby. So if the dragon's lair is near, that means there'd also be treasure. So the ogre examined the area, saw claw marks leading up to a cave. He entered and started moving through it, feeling as though he were being watched. He spotted one more hatchling and scared it off before climbing through some very precarious places in this cave, only to notice that many more hatchlings were around him. He felt urgency to get out of the area and get to the treasure that must be there, only to dodge around hatchlings trying to bite him. He ended up falling and breaking all of his limbs to get the treasure. Breaking all his limbs as the hatchlings all slowly climbed down to consume him. He ended up being the easy pickings. That was the title of the story. It's so much fun to see a story from a bad guy's perspective, like an objectively bad guy's perspective, and then see them get their just desserts. Like, you don't go around killing hatchlings. That is so brutal. Like, honestly, let's pretend that we are in Dragonlance, right? Like the Dragonlance world. So there was good and there was evil. And you came across an evil dragon hatchling. Would you kill it? I would probably try to raise like I like animals in general. So I feel like I would probably try to take it back home and teach it not to be a evil piece of shit. Like, maybe you end up with like a white dragon that's awesome, or if you're evil, then a gold dragon that's evil. Maybe we can break through this sort of weird stereotype of this type of creature will always be evil. And they've done it in other stories with Dragonlance anthology short stories, and even long form novels with the draconian ones specifically. So I think, I don't know. I'd like to see a story like that. Raise an evil dragon to be good, and let's see what happens. All right, so A Dragon to the Core by Roger E. Moore. See there? What a tale. This focused on a gnome named Gilbenstock who lived in Palanthas after the War of the Lance. He invented a dragon-shaped drilling machine. I clearly have a huge typo here, but it ended up breaking. He was approached by 3 men who hired him to dig out a collapsed mine. They paid him in diamonds, so he was very happy about that, and now wealthy. So he agreed to do the mining. He was visited by a mercenary type named Zorlin, and it turned out that Zorlin was hunting Seavac draconians that killed his wizard friend in Kalaman, and he tracked them here. He initially thought Gilbenstock was one of the Seavac draconians, but later learned otherwise. Gilbenstock was terrified of the man, rightfully so, and thought him dead at one point, but Zorlin just killed one of the Seavacs, which then turned into him, which is why he thought it was him. He took his machine out of Palanthas to the location in the canyon. En route, he was met by Dalamar, who was going to stop him because it was making so much noise. It was waking people up, and the entire town was all pissed off at him. And Dalamar was trying to study, and it interrupted his studying, until he destroyed a statue of Elistan. Why does no one like Elistan? Like, I get that he's a good guy. Like, he's like the pristine, golden child of clerics. But you can write characters to be interesting and good. Like, that's a choice that you make. If you write them to be insufferably good, well, then that's your fault. So I don't understand why everyone hates Elistan. All right. Anyway, Dalamar was pleased and let him go, but told him not to return unless he was on foot, as the dragon drilling machine was incredibly loud, large, and destructive. So the gnome met the remaining 2 men at the site and used his machine to dig a hole, breaking into a cavern. It turns out the men who hired him were in fact Seavac draconians who learned that an ancient dragon named Blood Glitter from the Second Dragon War was buried under there. Later, discovered by dwarves who reburied him under there. So the dragon was understandably anxious to get out and wreak destruction. When the gnome discovered the truth, he ran out of the tunnel right into Zorlin, who fought one draconian and was wounded. He was helped out by the gnome, and the gnome used his machine to reseal up the mine by setting it to explode. Ended up burying the dragon and killing the remaining draconian. This was a funny, exciting, twisting story where you weren't sure who was good or who was bad, and I really enjoyed it. There was a great gully dwarf named Squib that was the gnome's helper that brought a bunch of care and humor as well. There was a point where Squib actually rescued Gilbenstock. By Gilbenstock, throughout the whole story, was making this big to-do about being a vegan, like a vegetarian actually. And Squib clearly ate like rat meat because that's what gully dwarves always eat in stories. And so he was woken up because once he ran into Zorlin's dead body, the head had been removed from the corpse, like cut off. And so he passed out. The gully dwarf found him, dragged him back to his workshop, fed him rat beef broth, and brought him back. So I just think it's funny that this gully dwarf that the gnome constantly is talking smack about, even though he really does appreciate him for his work ethic, but he talks smack about his food habits. It's the food habits that brought him back to health to allow him to go almost get himself killed again. And when Zorlin really did almost die by the Seavac draconian in the dragon's tunnel, it was the gully dwarf that was helping him. It was just like, oh, Squib is the best. I want a Squib. Where's my Squib? All right, the next one's called Dragon Breath by Nick O'Donoghue. This story is about friends who live in and around a town that makes a batch of incredibly potent ale. It actually sets the inn on fire. That's how strong it is. And in the morning, the town was convinced that it was a dragon. They didn't want to tell them it was them. So they actually sent the friends off to go kill the dragon or run the dragon off, but they needed proof. Many of them had loves but couldn't marry them because they were broke. But the town offered a reward for this. So this is their chance to not only get out from under the shame of having burned down their own inn, but also marry the people that they wanted to marry, which is always a good thing. But the only problem was there was no dragon. So they just accidentally lit it on fire. So now they needed to find a dragon and kill it or drive it off with witnesses to come back and collect the money. So they traveled to a nearby town, saw a farmhouse that was destroyed. This mad old woman inside said that it was a dragon, and the group climbed a hill into mist to find this dragon. They were attacked, but it ended up being a gnome in a mechanical dragon that needed fuel to take him back to Mount Nevermind. The party gave them their alcohol as fuel, and it worked. The dragon flew off. The friends returned to the village as heroes. This is just a fun story about consequences and the fear of committing to love for not having the ability to take care of the person that you love, even if they don't need the money. I really enjoyed it. This whole series of stories, it should be dragons and gnomes because there's tons of gnomes in it. But it's just full of morals, It's like they were putting their lives on hold because they didn't feel like they deserved what they wanted. Now, you can equate that to someone you love and someone you want to marry. You can equate it to a particular profession or a job, or a decision you want to make in your life, a change you want to make. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you should not wait around for that thing. You need to take a chance in life and just go for it. You may fail, and failure happens, and that's okay because you learn from it. It'll hurt, and you'll have a couple bruises, but you'll learn from it, and that's more important in the long run because the next time you'll have a less of a chance of failing until you do finally succeed. So I love stories like this for that. All right, Fool's Gold by Jeff Grubb, another great writer. What a wild tale. This focused on a stranger coming to town with a dog called Fool's Gold. The stranger, named Jengar, is cursed by a dragon to tell the truth, which has forced him to leave other towns when honesty is not always appreciated. In my experience, it's rarely, if ever, appreciated. I'm an honest person, and that's how I know. The Baron of this new town wants to get rid of a gnome because the gnome's assistant is the love interest of the waitress the Baron wants to marry. I had that right. So he hires all mercenaries who enter the town to go get rid of the gnome. The only problem is that the gnome is a delightful fellow. All the mercenaries return to the Baron telling him that the gnome's not a threat to him, and so there's no reason to kill him. So the Baron uses his magical wand to capture the mercenaries and watch them starve to death, which sucks. Jengar is told to look into the gnome, and when he returns telling the same tale, the Baron shrinks and captures his dog. Now he's forced to get rid of the gnomish threat. First and foremost, don't mess with someone's animal. What's wrong with you? You're asking to be beat down or killed. Like, you don't mess with someone else's animal. Ugh. So this forces Jengar to examine the situation closer. He brings plans to make a speedboat to the gnome so that the gnome can leave, but after building it, they want to show it off to the village. So as everyone, including the Baron, arrives to watch, they marvel at this wonderful boat that actually works, the speedboat. The Baron demands to use it, and not knowing how, and ignoring all warnings by Jengar to the contrary, he rides it off into the horizon and is never seen from again, thereby removing the threat that the gnome was ever purportedly having, and this makes everyone happy. So, somehow the dog was let loose and they live happily ever after. It's a great story about honesty and how a situation to a problem is not always, the solution to a problem is not always what's expected. In this particular case, getting rid of the person that had the problem with the gnome was the solution. And it worked. Scourge of the Wicked Kendragon by Janet Pack is the next short story. This silly story is about a Kender named Mapshaker Wanderfuss, who steals or borrows a magical dragon statue that turns him into a brass dragon. He flies all over the land, learning what it means to be a dragon, and discovering that birds and insects don't care that you're a dragon at all. They still want to annoy you and eat you and drink your blood and stuff. Then he inadvertently terrifies a knight's horse, and the knight swears to kill him. So he starts to hunt him down. The mage that owned the statue that the Kender took whose house was broke into, begins to chase after the Kender with some other magical device, which points them in the direction of the knight, who is then chasing the Ken dragon, because the knight asks the brass dragon, "What are you?" And he's like, "I'm a Ken dragon," because he's not a Kender, obviously. It all culminates in the knight fighting an ogre. The Ken dragon goes to help him, but puts him to sleep with his breath weapon and himself in the process. He wakes, the knight is ready to slay him, but is stopped by the mage, and he's turned back into a Kender after having given the statue back. Then he goes off onto another adventure as the mage and knight go off on their own frustrated way. Just a fun little bite-sized Kender tale, and I really enjoyed it. All right, so the next one here, And Baby Makes 3 by Amy Stout. This was an odd little story. It's about a mercenary named Stoic John and his companion copper dragon Croesus. The dragon likes to eat small children of all races and species. This story suggests a lot of truly nefarious activity between the two of them, but stops just short of actually saying what you know they're inferring by reading the story. I mean, really dirty, gross, filthy, non-speakable type things. But it's normal. It's so incredibly cool to see a DragonLance story like this. So the meal the dragon is about to eat is a young boy who's fearless and screaming back at the dragon. And this throws them both for a loop, as this boy should be terrified because it's a dragon. It turns out that the child's name is Jax, and he is a she. More so, the child was left at the cave by a woman that John had fooled around with a lot. This woman is a mage, and she warned John about leaving her. It turned out she had a child, and the child liked to set things on fire, including her village. So the mother sent her to her father. Abandoned her, more like, but still. The dragon and John decide to keep the girl as she makes them food, and it tastes wonderful. So it turns out the child's a good cook. It was just an odd little story that I don't really know why, but I really enjoyed it. It had no real moral, tale to be told, no point. It was just a series of random occurrences, and it was super isolated. This could very easily be sorry, my nose is just. This could very easily be like a theater play, because it takes place in one location, and it's just a series of anecdotal, silly coincidences and happenstances, all wrapped around these two people that travel together that are really bad people, that do really bad things, like eat children. It's crazy. All right. So the next one, everyone's going to love this. The First Dragon Army Bridging Company by Dawn Perrin. This was a great short story. It's about Kang and his engineer regiment, and the second short story that I've read about the regiment. In this story, Kang is brought to High Lord Erica's and ordered to build a bridge for the armies to cross into Elven lands. Erica's demands that it's built overnight, which is a seemingly impossible task. But, tired of building latrines, Kang says it can be done and leaves to go do it. The regiment is excited to do their actual job, so they happily head out. As they're building it, elves attack, and Slith crosses the river to attack them. Slith is a Seavac Draconian. Kind of a big deal in the whole Draconian story narrative with Kang. He kills... Oh, geez, where'd I go? He crosses the river to attack them, hunts elves while the bridge is being completed by everyone else. A silver dragon notices them, and Slith kills 2 Bozaks that were carried off by the dragon in order to kill the dragon, because they explode when they die, and that kills the dragon. Finally, the bridge is completed with casualties, and when the officer arrives, Kang reports that it's complete, and now the dragon armies don't actually need it, as the Golden General is so close, so Ericas wants to adjust his tactics. Then, Draconians, kind of bothered by the fact, cross the bridge just so someone will cross it. They bury their dead, and then they return to camp. The whole story is about troops ordered to do the impossible, and when it's done, it's not even needed. I felt like I lived through this exact situation my entire military contract, and it's one of the many reasons I did not re-up into the military. You're always told to hurry up and then wait. and then hurry up, and then wait, and then do this task that needs to be done right now. And then you realize that it never had to be done then or ever. It's the whole military structure is completely messed up. And it's all based on fear and their sick desire to show how useful they are to their superiors. And if instead they just did what they were asked when they were asked to do it and not try to jump the gun in requests, then everything would be fine. But you can't do that because that's logical, and there's nothing logical about the military. All right. I actually did enjoy, in reflection, my military service, but while I was in it, it was rough. So The Middle of Nowhere by Dan Harnden is the next story. This story had an interesting twist that I will spoil in just a second. Start counting down. It begins with a town in the middle of nowhere. It's populated by scribes, but we don't discover until the end that they're actually scribing the Dark Queen's teachings. Told you I'd spoil it. But there is more. The group is tormented by a dragon that appears and is coming again, so the mayor goes to a local wizard to ask for help. The wizard's willing to aid, but he requires a 60% tax on all the town's profits for as long as he lives in order to protect them from future dragons. It never once at the beginning of this tells you what color the dragon is, and so you're led to believe that these are good villagers protecting themselves from bad dragons. So when it breathes fire, it will only kill itself. So we assume if it's breathing fire, it must be a red dragon. No, other dragons breathe fire. So the plan goes off without a hitch. The treasure's taken. Years go by, and there's a festival commemorating the day annually. The town's sick and tired of giving away their money for seemingly nothing because it's been years and nothing's happened. And so they decide they're going to go vote out the mayor. The mayor then hears a bard playing, brings him into his home. He tells them that he will pay him to play at the festival, and that he also has a secondary job for him. He uses him to distract the wizard, and then he kills the wizard, bringing the treasure back to the town to surprise everyone. What he doesn't realize is that the bard is a gold dragon, the child of the slain dragon from years before, and as the townspeople are dying, they ask why the wizard isn't protecting them. And the mayor knows it's because he just killed the wizard. Great twist, great story. Really fun to read. All right, so the next one is Kaz and the Dragon's Children by Richard A. Knaak. A wonderful return of Kaz the Minotaur. Kaz is traveling after the war and comes across a mysterious beast that he barely fends off. Then he's caught by a black-robed wizard named Master Bren. The wizard doesn't know who Kaz is, and Kaz plays up that he was one of the Dark Queen's minions during the war. He's brought into the wizard's lair as a servant and shown that the wizard captured a weakened silver dragon and her eggs. He was inspired by a dark cleric of Takesis who wanted to turn the dragon eggs into monstrosities, i.e., proto-draconians. The wizard was doing the same thing with the silver dragon eggs. He used an illusion to make the dragon believe that her eggs were safe just out of reach, as the wizard used her dragon magic to experiment on her real eggs. Kaz tried to release her, only to be caught by the wizard and was trapped, preparing to fight the monster proto-dragon man the wizard had created. The dragon man broke through the prison and attacked the weakened wizard as its form started to deteriorate. The wizard, now panicked, now panicked and let Kaz loose, hoping that he would save him. And Kaz fought the Dragon Man to the death, barely defeating him. After killing it, he turned to the wizard, who ended up being trapped in his own spell, and died. Kaz found the silver dragon had died after having expended all of her magic and realizing that she was actually harming her own dragon eggs in the process, which is devastating. Kaz ended up taking the dragon eggs to find her mate and deliver them safely. This is a great story about the original attempts at creating draconians, which does date back to the Third Dragon War. And I do love when we get to see sort of the early failed attempts, whether it's just through short little stories like this or whether it's through gaming product stuff, about making draconians. And to know that it's not something that was just in the War of the Lance. Like, this was something that the Dark Queen was trying to do for a long time. All right, the next one's called, sorry, give me a second. Into the Light by Linda P. Baker. Oh, this is another good one, too. This is an emotional story about a Plains of Dust tribe that was slaughtered by dragons. The only survivors were a warrior named Torin, an apprentice mage named Bayar, and an outsider who was married to a tribesman now dead named Mari. They found each other in the aftermath of the destruction and began to travel together to an oasis as all the water was poisoned. The rumors of dragons were not believed by them all, but they had to focus on the task at hand. At night, they felt the fear of the dragons overhead, and a crystal artifact the mage carried grew hot to the touch when the dragons flew overhead, as it did when the tribe was attacked originally. Torin wanted to go to Sylvanesty when he learned that Mari was in fact an elf from there, but she refused to go as she's a dark elf. It turns out she died in the Thon-Thalos River and was told to go back to the world of men and tell them that the gods had returned, by Mischievous, of course. Oh gosh, I just lost my spot. That the gods have returned, as have dragons. Then when she told Lorak, he banished her, as only the higher classes in their culture could possibly know anything like that. Ugh, Sylvanesty elves are the worst and they deserved everything they got. Okay. So she was welcomed by her husband in the tribe, but she never spoke about the experience. No one really believed her, so they headed to the Calcus Mountains. Thorin was wounded and weary, so he was lagging behind, and they saw a river, so Mari and Bayar ran toward it. Mari was abducted by a draconian, and again, they don't even know what the hell these things are, and Thorin rushed to help her after seeing Bayar with a sword wound that was fatal. He defeated the draconian, which turned to stone, trapping his weapon. Then another draconian came and nearly killed him, but Mari used the crystal artifact to shield his body, and when it was struck, it blew apart the draconian and revealed a holy symbol of Mishakal. She used it to heal Bayar and Thorin and realized that she had to return to Sylvanesty with this proof to save her people. And that's where it ended. And we all know what she's going to find when she gets there. So this is bitter because we know what's happened to Sylvanesty in the interim. But I love this, but the love that built over the length of the story between Thorin and Mari was beautiful, and it really did touch me. It was a lovely tale. I'm a sucker for romance anyway, and to see this woman that Thorin, just because of her position in his culture, saw as literally a whore, ended up becoming a love interest because he realized that his preconceived notions about her were completely wrong, and that everything about who and what she was divine providence, if anything. And I love that it wasn't just Goldmoon and Riverwind in the War of the Lance that were given an opportunity to realize that the gods had in fact returned and that they needed to deliver the message. It was the rest of the world around all of them that refused to accept it, refused to acknowledge it, and suffered because of it. So pretty crazy. Only a couple stories left here, people. So the next is The Best by Margaret Weis. And it is the best story. I've read this short story a handful of times, and it never gets old. I've even reviewed it before on this channel in another anthology. What makes this story so great is not the twist at the end, which itself is great, but the characters and their interplay with each other. They're a great party of believable characters interacting in a wildly stressful situation. The setup is that a dragon has been raiding the treasure from an entire sort of region in multiple kingdoms. The king was kidnapped and being held for ransom, so his seneschal called out for the best heroes to join at a tavern and go after the dragon. They all met up, and the seneschal explained the task. He alone knew where the dragon's lair was, so the whole crew went together to the lair, snuck in, and found their way into the lair. Fought some skeleton guards and entered the lair proper, seeing all the stolen treasure and more besides. This is when the seneschal revealed that he was in fact the dragon and killed them all in their tracks. It was a wickedly satisfying tale that I can't imagine ever tiring of reading. Such a good story. If you've never read this yourself, it's in a dragon magazine. It's in a bunch of anthologies. Do yourself a favor and read it. It's really, really entertaining. And it just proves that Margaret Weis is a wildly inventive, entertaining, and skilled writer. Because the whole time, the first time you read it, you have no idea about the twist. And you're just like, oh, this is just a fun story. It's like a one-shot D&D adventure. And you could just imagine the players behind each of these characters having a great time playing up stereotypes and biases and just going through the adventure. It's just so much fun. You got to read it. All right, Last one is called The Hunt by Kevin Stein. What a strange and somber way to end this anthology. This story is about a solamnic knight that is hunting a black dragon named Borak. He's obsessed and driven. He's been hunting it for as long as he can remember and encounters a shade in the swamp which he slays, then finally finds the dragon. It's an ancient and dying. It asks to be murdered and granted peace and death, but Galen doesn't want to grant him death like this. He wants a fight. The dragon asks if he remembers his life, and the knight doesn't. He's told that he, in fact, died a long time ago, and he's just a spectre. And the knight is shocked, realizing the truth. The dragon dies of his own accord, and the knight butchers it in fury as his prey is dead, but he will live forever. It's a story about our passions and our hatreds taking over our lives. We have to stop focusing on the negatives in this life and instead take ownership and find joy in what and who we can. The internet and social media is just a machine of hate and anger as far as I see it. It fuels constant negativity, and yet we as a species are totally addicted to it. We grow frustrated with it, but are drawn back to it. But we don't have to live in this weird cycle of pain. We can walk away, take a walk, go for a hike, get in nature, disconnect. It's a choice we make. Find joy. Read a book like this anthology. Connect to what it actually means to be human through adventure and exploration, connection with other people in real life. Search for love. Have some sex. We are so much more than that what brings us down. That is what this story reminded me of. For that, I truly loved it. This entire collection is great. There's not a stinker of a tale herein. I highly recommend it to anyone who loves Dragonlance and dragons, even if that tale is only tangentially connected to them. You will not regret it, and allow me to reiterate, seek out joy in your life. And if you find yourself consumed by negative emotions, stop what you're doing. Examine where they're coming from and make the choice to change your behavior. You don't have to feel that way. All right, let's see what you guys had to say. So, Indarius Termina, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Every, how you doing? You just touched a habanero and then your eye. No! Flush it out. You're canning in your garden? That's amazing. I have a garden as well, and like I make wine and I make beer. I have grapevines in my backyard. I'm actually making a batch right now. We have tons of tomatoes, so I kind of wish you were nearby. You could make me some salsa. Let's see. Hammer to everything is nail. Exactly. Exactly. Imagine a deep dragon tripping on shrooms. That would be terrifying. Let's see. DMT. Dragonlance audiobook's free. How you doing, man? Checking out the reflection of your screen in my glasses. There's no Pornhub, I guarantee it. Although I do randomly get emails in my junk mail that says, "Hello, pervert. We caught you masturbating on your camera." Which I don't, so I know it's a scam. But it's like, how many people have fallen for that? And they actually pay these scammers. It's unbelievable. It has to work or else people wouldn't still do it, right? I've seen it like 5 or 6 times so far. So who knows? Maybe I do have cameras I don't know about. It's going to leak. The Nuevo DM, how you doing? Oh, I already said hi to you in the beginning. Hi, anyway. Nature versus nurture. Yeah, I love that idea. Jason96, what's up? Citharos, how you doing? Hearing a few words, you knew the story I was referring to. Oh, that's awesome. It was a great one. I really like. I've had this anthology, this literal book that I read it from since high school. And the job that I had after high school was Brackman Brothers Bagels, which was bought out by Einstein Brothers Bagels. And they had a bunch of stores around Salt Lake and Utah County. And so I would deliver the dough. And when I wasn't driving, I was reading this book. And it just constantly reminded me of that time in my life before I went in the military, after I graduated high school, had no prospects for a future because my parents refused to help me with college. So the only way I could afford college is to go in the military. But I wanted to try to not do that because I didn't want to do it. Really great time. I played a lot of D&D in those days. I was hanging out with a bunch of gothic people and we were playing Ravenloft ad nauseum. But it was fun. Like I had a good time. Good times. All right. Well, that's all I had for this. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know this probably bothers people that I throw in my own personal thoughts and sort of messages into these reviews or my different episodes and stuff like that. But I do genuinely see a pattern that I didn't experience when I was younger of a system of monetized hate everywhere. And it's not just like on one political side of the spectrum or one type of person. It's everywhere. And there's no reason for it. Like you can be a pleasant human being and still have very strong opinions about things. And if someone else disagrees with you, you can still play D&D with them and have a great time, because what other people think and feel does not affect you unless you allow it to. And it shouldn't. And they shouldn't want it to. Keep yourself in yourself, be the best version of you, and just have fun in life, because this is the only one we've got. That's how I see it. Hey, Michael, how you doing? All right, so that's it for my review of The Dragons of Krynn, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. What did you think of the dragon-centric stories? Do you have a favorite kind of dragon? I think mine would be... maybe copper. Aren't they the ones that like just chat up people and like trap them to talk to them? I think that's hilarious. And finally, have you ever fought a dragon in a role-playing game? They can be really tough, or the DM can be really nice to you. It's totally up in the air. Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This goes to help other people who love Dragonlance, just like you, find this channel and find other people like me who love Dragonlance too. We can all get together. Yeah. That was like a Partridge Family song or a Brady Bunch song. Let's get together. Yeah. I'm showing my age. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in that celebration. So until next time for DragonLance Saga, my name's Adam Slanjavar.